This week on Banking With Us, we feature Croskery Capital. Absolute, intuitive, opportunistic. I'm Amita Persaud Webb. Please stay tuned. As a trusted advisor to many businesses and individuals, Croskery Capital focuses on assisting corporates with strategy, board of directors building, corporate executive recruitment, and alignment. Croskery Capital assists its clients with troubleshooting, financial accounting, and operational business issues on a professional and hands-on basis. CEO and Chairman Mark Croskery talks to us more.
So we came about in 2019. Roughly around October, November 2019. We came about around that time. I was in the financial sector for about 13 or so years in my previous capacity, actually with SSL. And so at that point, I moved on and decided to really get into financial advisory, consulting, and I had a passion for investment banking. I was doing a lot of investment banking, and persons would really know me a lot as just Mark Croskery or Croskery, and so it was a logical step. And I said, well, to boost my earnings or so, Croskery Capital sounds really good. And really, we're an arranger. We do financial advisor consulting, predominantly really work with relationships and so forth. So we're not a principal investor. We don't give investment advice. And so it was just born, bit of a Jerry Maguire moment, as I say. Took the plunge, and we've really loved it ever since. Really beat our budget for 2020, although it was very challenging and tough, especially, nobody planned for the pandemic and COVID. But it's been fun, and we love it so far. I really had what I thought and felt was great relationships, and I was always in a service business, and so with some of these great relationships, they really wanted help, whether it was selling companies, buying companies, or just relationship help, meaning try and help them with their back office. Like, persons really genuinely, as Jamaicans, we really keep a lot on our chest. So they really don't want to open up unless they trust you, even if they're young, middle-aged, or old. But I think through just relationships and trust, a lot of persons would say, Mark, could you help us find a CFO or even like an advisory board or a board? So I started to really say to myself, well, it's what I was good at. You need a company for just to be official, etc. And so we got it up and running, got things going, and really realized that there was a service needed out there. I mean, it did exist in the market. It wasn't brand new, but we ourselves could maybe make it better or add some value proposition to it. And that's what we've really been doing for the past, year and change, year and 4 or 5 months or so. For most, if not all of our clients, we have non-disclosure agreements in place. We, while we have a website, we are official, of course. We really pride ourselves on the privateness, just being private, discreet. And it's how most of the businesses like this work globally, as you research them, whether it's a McKinsey or anyone like that. I mean, those are massive firms, that are in many countries. We've only just gotten started. But so we usually let the client lead, and if the client wants to disclose that we are their advisor or we're their financial advisor, of course not to be mistaken with giving investment advice or being a dealer rep, but we're just we're a consultant. We're helping them get through their problems, just like an engineer. So in a case like that, Aria Management Company Resorts, came out recently, a couple months ago, and said, Croskery Capital is their advisor. So in a case like that, they're looking to, acquire hotels in Jamaica, do transactions in the tourism space. And so we've really, enjoyed, or Croskery Capital has enjoyed working with them, helping them with governance, helping them to potentially arrange capital. And that's been really, really enjoyable and fun. It's a very difficult space because tourism, as you're aware, has been really, beaten up with COVID-19. Another transaction which was made public recently, got some good mileage for Croskery Capital, it's the psychedelic space, which is a new space for us. The cannabis space was really all the buzz 5-10 years ago, and now psychedelics is very hot globally. Mental health, mushrooms, but they call it psychedelics. Even Peter Thiel, which is a huge billionaire investor, has invested in it through Cross Pathways.
The company 2020 Produce Sales, TWGL, will be working with Croskery Capital.
We're involved in that as a director capacity and an advisor for the Caribbean, and that should be exciting in the coming weeks or month or so. Just assisting them. They had some involvement with Kaya in Jamaica, and they really lean on us for networking, sourcing deals or transactions. And that's another mandate that we were able to pick up. So our goal is really to pick up mandates and to really help people. A lot of clients will go to a securities dealer, or they can also go to a commercial bank, a merchant bank. We have very few merchant banks now in Jamaica. So, and then there's some also listed entities which are like investment houses, but they're not regulated necessarily. But you have a few of those on the stock exchange as well, which have taken in sizable amounts of capital, or maybe credit products, they call them. So whether they're in those three boxes, a lot of times when persons need capital, they're going to these companies. But sometimes persons are genuinely worried that their audited financials or their business plans might kind of get away from them. They don't know where they might end up, etc. Or there might be bias behind them. So what we really offer at Croskery Capital is an independent solution. So if you come to us and you have a problem, hopefully it's not too late. A lot of times persons come when it's very late, or it's a crisis, or beyond the crisis. So the thing is that we can really help you, whether you're high net worth individual, whether you're a big company, whether you're an SME. We think the SME space is still wide open in Jamaica. A lot of the companies that did really well out of it 10 years ago have really gone to just doing big deals. So that's a wide open space that we tend to do pretty well in that space, and we kind of like to focus on that space. We think there's a niche there for us at Croskery Capital.
Coming up next, core values. Absolute, intuitive, opportunistic. Mark tells us more.
High integrity, opportunistic, absolute, are some of them. And we like those things. We believe the advisor space is something that we can be opportunistic in. We can take it a far way with no conflicts of interest, by being ethical, professional with the clients. Absolute means it's in a way similar to the stock market. If you are a believer and invested on an absolute basis, you know why you get in, you know why you get out. So we believe we keep it pretty simple and straightforward with the client. So if the client says they're okay with mobilization or retainers, or they're okay with success fees, but it's very plain vanilla and you know what you're getting into, and the client knows what they want. It's not free, but at the end of the day, you know what everybody's getting into. I think when you look globally, or even in the Caribbean or Jamaica, there's always issues with persons complaining about not getting what they thought, and I think a lot of times the issue is whether it's the handshake or the black and white. The problems are in the beginning, the first few weeks of the transaction. So we try to keep it really straightforward, and typically if there's a problem, it's in the first few weeks of trying to agree to the terms or the circumstances. We have a very light team. We believe in pretty much outsourcing or full outsourcing. We use quite a lot of external auditors, consultants on the outside. We keep it very lean, so we use a lot of external auditors on the outside if the client wants it. We use a lot of attorneys on the external if the client wants it. And so we are your typical, what I like to say is consulting arranger firm, whereby if the mandates are with other professionals, we'll onboard the client by having them sign directly from a risk perspective with that other professional service. From time to time we may subcontract, but it's doubtful because we really like to keep things separate and apart, and we want to keep our costs down as much as possible as well. When you say private equity has always been here, it depends on how you detail it and what stage and so, but it has been here from, from even the 90s. Depends on what transaction you put your radar on. But even when you look at this necessarily wasn't private equity. But when you look back at when Mr. Leachin came to Jamaica and really, came in strong or revved up the market and bought large blocks of Kingston Wharves and at the time Dennis and Geddes DNG, Red Stripe, and bought all these chunks. And in hindsight, I think that was about 2005, so 15 years ago. And it wasn't buying private companies, but just doing that in the stock market in Jamaica was unheard of. I think you've had US investors do it in the 90s. If you really followed, I was always an avid follower of the shareholder top 10 lists or top 100 lists. But coming into the PE side or private equity side, what has happened is that interest rates in Jamaica have been so low, and that's traditionally what drives this whole alternative space, whether it's real estate or private equity for operating companies. So every couple of months now you hear somebody say, well, even if they have $1 million US, or it's even if it's smaller than that, or somebody might say they have a much bigger ticket size, they're now going into private equity, or they want to go into private equity. And that's a great thing for Croskery Capital, because we're not focused on that side, we're focused on providing the services that they need. But in our opinion, it's really driven by the central bank having this interest rate at 0.5% and change. It has been here now for a number of years, and so there's really nothing to do with your money. The pension funds, have gobbled up the junior market stocks, they've gobbled up the main market stocks, and then, okay, they're buying a lot of real estate. Now the thing is how much more apartments can they buy in the very nice areas of Kingston at 50 million Jamaican, 60 million? Probably a committee is going to say that sounds a bit too focus risky. Let's just watch. And how many stocks are they going to buy at 19 times earnings? Very expensive when they can buy even a US stock at 15 times earnings. So you're in this kind of bubble and a dilemma now whereby, if once the legislation, the laws allow it, which I think is 5% now, then private equity becomes very popular with what they call accredited investors, high net worth investors, Jamaicans, and as well as some pensions or even just private companies with surpluses. So that's all the craze, it's all the buzz now. The thing is that Jamaica, we're still 3 million people. There's not just a plethora of companies here. So now you're starting to see some of these private equity companies look at, Guyana and Barbados and Trinidad. You just saw proven by, spend I think 21 million US and look at a company in Barbados. So Jamaica is now reaching outside within the Caribbean to spend money. But it's great for us because one of the tricks with private equity is you better have good advisors, accountants, lawyers, people in marketing. And if you don't have those things and get them in your wheelhouse, typically you're going to have a rough time or you're going to fail. So a lot of these PE shops now, Amita, which is really, really good for Croskery Capital now, need strong advisor services. With COVID-19, the pandemic, which we never expected, like most shops or most persons, really, if we had clients or if we had mandates, especially in tourism, has pretty much, wiped that out. I think there's only maybe 1 or 2 financial institutions now that are taking a more bullish or measured stance on tourism, while it seems everybody else, and I guess in another 12 months from now we'll see which decision was right. Usually, as the old adage says, is if you go against the curve, you're right. So maybe these 1 or 2 financial companies are making the right decision to still support tourism. But if you go across the board, if we have 37 in Jamaica or whatever the number is, almost 35 are saying, we're not in the market for tourism. So that would have, let's say, hurt us, or that would have been, if you had a few mandates or if you're trying to get clients in that specific sector, that would have been a kind of rude awakening or, hurt. But in terms of companies that were distressed already, or in terms of companies that the owners got really worried, and what would have helped us is persons who were having sleepless nights and had to call and say, I have a really weak back office here. I have a really weak CFO. I have some family problems. I have some succession issues. We just don't have enough cash in the bank right now. We need, or somebody in our family or somebody in our business just doesn't know how to speak the bank lingo. No, you call in a Croskery Capital, you call in a Mark Croskery. We can see it tomorrow morning. It's not like, okay, let's do a calendar appointment a week from today. Yeah. Let's then do a Zoom call 2 weeks from now. Let's send you a mandate 4 weeks from now. No, we'll come and see it tomorrow, 2 days from now. That would have helped us. Again, not designed, but actually in that type of case, COVID and creating some distress has actually worked out well for us. Similar to when you look at the logistics space, like Amazon or Mailpack, from a Jamaica perspective, COVID has bumped their business substantially from the shipping standpoint.
Coming up next, we talk COVID and the stock market. What's next for Croskery Capital?
Really like to, in 2021, still a tough year. I mean, when you look at, some of the tourism projections, which Jamaica does depend on. We know there's different theories out there all the time about tourism in Jamaica, but if tourism still doesn't come back for another 9-12 months or even longer, some persons say 2 years or pre-COVID levels. So we're still thinking about that. It could be a tough year, but for us, we really want to get some partnerships now. We think we're in that kind of modus operandi. There's some agencies out there, strong government agencies, where you have to get on their panels, to do some heavy lifting or help them. So we're having some of those conversations or looking at that for this year. Help them, and as they call them, cross referrals and vice versa. So, and then even, audit firms, when you look at the new normal and how it works in the US or Europe, it's good to really have an advisory and some of the audit firm partnerships and however that works. One of the things that we'd also consider is we'd like to be in the principal game, Amita, one day. It's not for Croskery Capital's agenda. Maybe on the agenda is maybe a sister company or something like that. Maybe that's in this year, or maybe that's 2022. But the clients definitely, once you build a relationship with them and they trust you implicitly, it's a natural synergy. The big thing that they want, once you go all the way with them and you fix their management accounts, their audited financials, and you break bread with them and you get to know their family, they want some capital, or they want a preference share, or they want some debt. So I think one of the concerns we have at more so in the advisory space, and definitely we can benefit from it potentially in 2021, is that if you look at what's happening in the stock market and how the capital is accumulating now, and there was a time when it would have happened in Barbados in the Caribbean, where consolidation, as well as Trinidad, it really pushes faster. So if you look at the APOs in the market right now, there's only a few companies able to do APOs, in fairness. So as the capital really pushes into a few companies and a few hands, let's say, what ends up happening is that your mid-tier companies and your SMEs, your mid-tier is usually like no man's land, like in tennis. So what happens is that if we haven't seen the worst yet of the pandemic, and let's say the bank moratoriums start to run out, and whether that's in March of this year or June. March of this year is a 1-year anniversary. Technically in Jamaica, roughly around there. And then June is 1 year and 3 months. And in the US market, a release just came out that 18% of renters are in arrears on their rent. So and that's worse than 2008 in the US, 57 billion US owed. We don't get those stats in Jamaica, the Caribbean yet. So if we assume things are bad and they could get worse, and what is the fallout in Jamaica, then whoever has a capital, the big companies, so look at who just did APOs, Derrimon, so will they consolidate and buy out the small food companies? So Burrito has raised a lot of capital. There's always NCB and a few others. So nothing against that, but what will happen is you should get a consolidation of the markets happening. Food and beverage market, healthcare, financial, and it just means that there'll be less competition, but there should be one should expect as a Jamaican citizen that there should be some consolidation this year, probably into next year. We are fighters, we know that, but there should be some significant consolidation in the market. So if you're looking to invest in the stock market, it might be a good time to look at sometimes the bigger companies when there are these potential, clouds on the horizon. Although we don't, give investment advice, the thing is that a lot of persons are chasing, the high growth rate companies now, which are probably only a few on the exchange, like, Mailpack. They were looking at Nuster Express, but they just threw in a clinker for the quarter, and they just had a kind of a large loss. And then there's a few others, Derriman and Grace doing very well because they're in local food, not tourism food, let's say. But the thing is that if the market does consolidate and there's some clouds still to come, the old adage, as I keep saying, is you might want to be in some of the stronger companies that might do mergers and acquisitions deals, or as you said, private equity, that might be later this year buying out some of these mid-tier companies. So if you notice, a lot of the junior companies that were all the rage from 2009 to 2016, a lot of them now are actually, their earnings are down 50%, and a lot of them are struggling. Now, if we took a bet, a lot of them are owned by families. How much of them are going to want to stay in this and fight for the next year or 2 years if COVID strings out? Or how many of them maybe just take a buyout offer and cash out? My bet would be that some of them decide to take a buyout offer over the next 12 to 24 months. So that's what's interesting, is that we're now 10 months into COVID. The earnings on some of those junior companies are down 40 to 60%. The stock price hasn't dropped in some cases by more than 10%. So the analyst or the market is still saying that, look, this is a one-off instant. So, but that they were saying that 6 months ago. So we're now coming up to 12 months of COVID. So you're going to get more earnings. Now the only companies' earnings who really haven't fallen are Caribbean Cream. So you're at home eating more ice cream. Mailpack is a sector you're still, buying lots of Amazon shipping, and they do the local Price Smart, etc., or local goods. So there's a few which have been COVID resistant, but the bulk of them are way down. But the stock prices have held up. Interest rates are so low that people aren't selling their stocks. Persons are saying, okay, COVID is a one-off instant; it will go away. But what we're seeing is that COVID could be here longer. There's a new strain in the UK, there was something else about Brazil and the US today. So, nobody knows how long this whole COVID or virus is going to stay here. I mean, if it's here another 6 months, should the stocks pull back a bit? But if interest rates are at 0.5%, just like in the US, if interest rates are also in the US at 0.25%, like what we just saw, let's say a week ago in the US, stocks hit all-time highs. So the same theory in the US is happening in Jamaica. It's a big takeaway for investors, is that in the US, the economy might not be good, but with the stimulus plans and everything happening and the interest rates being low, your money goes into stocks. So stocks are raging. And it's the same in Jamaica.
And that's it for this week on Banking with Us. I'm Amita Persaud Webb, and until next time, please keep it tuned to Business Access TV.